Okay, so I have Sarah Lissy here that interviewing. She's our natural hazard expert, and it's kind of the part of a deal with buying a house. It's kind of boring because you're just looking at a bunch of stuff, but when you have a bunch of fires, like we do here in California right now, we have earthquakes. It becomes more fun.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily the thing at the time that you're thinking about, unless you're buying a house while this stuff is going on or selling it. So just wanted to thank you for coming in and talking about this topic. I know it's fun for some, and sometimes it's not fun dealing with it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's definitely one of those things that I think that people kind of glaze over and they're like, it's not really as exciting as the new kitchen, but it's definitely way more important because you want that kitchen to still be standing. So. Yep,
you want the kitchen standing. You want the fun backyard.
Yeah. Foundation,
everything, and you don't want Mother Nature to take a big toll on your house.
Right.
So, before we jump into, I guess, some of the questions that are ready, what do you see people failing to do when they're looking at NHDs, National Hazard Disclosures, just for the lingo people listening?
Really, most people don't even look at it. I think they get so much paperwork and so many disclosures, they don't even look at it. They kind of just go, oh, okay, my agent's going to tell me what I need to know, and they go right by it. And even though, I've had a lot of my previous buyers that are now sellers, like, I don't even remember this report. What do you mean I signed it? So it's one of those things that I think gets looked over more often than not.
Absolutely. So I guess what's your recommendation working with agents like ourselves when dealing with these reports?
Really, to just take a moment and look at them. I know with our report we have a quick we have a sheet that's called a snapshot, and that just tells you everything you need to be looking at, because the reality is these pages are 35 pages of stuff, but not all of it is information you actually need to be looking at that pertains to the property. There's statutory disclosures, and which would be like Megan's Law, or things that aren't actual indeterminations, but we have to include them just as a protection for the buyers and for the agents to make sure that everybody's aware of these things.
Okay. So what exactly is in an NHD report?
The NHD report is going to give you any geological findings about the properties, if they're flood zone, fire zone, and then it also gives you some of the tax information, Melrose, the tax base, all that kind of information, which is nice. And then there's also an environmental section that'll give you any man-made hazards, which would be underground oil wells, gas tanks, things like that are going to affect the property and maybe their decision to buy. Because at the end of the day, it's just informing themselves so that they can make that decision.
Yeah, and I think it's important when you mentioned about the tax part, because I actually had a buyer a few years ago, and I didn't know about it was Melrose, but in the report it stated it was Melrose. So I was the agent that discovered it, and not even the listing agent knew that information.
Yeah, I actually just had somebody call me a couple weeks ago and say, I can't thank you so much for that snapshot that you guys have, because it alerted the buyers in Melrose, same situation where they weren't aware of them. And so it brought it to light early in the transaction versus at closing going, hey, what do you mean?
Yeah. You have that loan estimate, and oh yeah, by the way, $200 a month extra.
Yeah, exactly.
To live in this nice area. So, and by the way, on the oil, I think that's important because before I was in real estate, I was an oil executive, and LA was number one as far as oil producing in the world about 100 years ago.
Yeah, you can actually, there's in our report we include the website where you can go onto the oil trackers, and if you look out towards those beach and coastal areas, I mean, it almost looks like a big black dot. There's so many oil wells there. Right
behind the beach and El Segundo, all that.
Yes, all up into Seal Beach, and there's quite a few, and it's important information.
25% of the world's oil.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So good. Okay, and then what type of different levels of reports are there?
So there's two different levels of reports. One is the NHD with your tax information, and then there's that environmental section that you can add on. It's not required by law, but I would always recommend adding it on, because that's the one that's going to give you the oil wells and the man-made hazards as well.
Yeah, I always recommend that as well. Anyway, because disclose everything possible so that you leave nothing to chance, and there's no surprises, no fire dangers, flood zones, all the fun stuff that we're dealing with right now these days. And what would be the cost of the difference between the different reports?
So
negligible?
Yeah, I mean it's usually a $20-$30 difference.
Okay.
I know ours is $69.95 and then $99, so it's a $30 difference. Not much.
Yeah, so
Well worth.
yeah, absolutely. Do you want to be in a lawsuit for $30? I mean, come on,
Not really.
you don't want to. Okay, and with a natural hazard report, who pays for the report?
So that's a seller cost. It gets
Okay.
paid through the seller's proceeds at close of escrow.
Okay.
So typically it can get ordered at listing or it can get ordered when the property sells.
Mm-hmm.
Either one is fine, but then it doesn't get paid until the escrow actually closes and it'll get paid by the seller.
Good. And us as agents, it's best for us to find out this information before anything pops up, just so there's no surprise. We know what we're working with.
Yeah,
Well.
I always say sooner rather than later because there's no cancellation fee on it, so you can always order at listing time,
Mm-hmm.
and that way you know if you're in a flood zone, a fire zone, anything that you're going to need to alert potential buyers.
Hey, Mr. Seller, you're on a flood zone. Did you know that?
Yeah, I'm sure they probably know because they're paying
The
incredible
right.
insurance premiums.
Yeah, we had a client a couple years ago that they got redesignated onto a flood zone.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. Do you know how they do the flood process? How often?
It's not very often.
Okay.
So every once in a while, if there's a big thing, I know that they actually just redid some flood zones. So a lot of people's insurance has changed, and there's not notification like, "Hey, we're changing it." FEMA just goes out and decides and determines, okay, this is in a flood zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, it could be every 10 years. It could be there's a major flood, and with the weather and the plains changing so much, like they have, and all the building that they've had. Maybe it wasn't a flood zone then, but now there's so many residences. It's now an issue, and they have to go back and rezone.
And years like this year where we have a bunch of rainwater, have to rezone it.
Yes.
And the flood disclosure is now required for renters now these days.
It is. And that has to do with renters not having insurance, and the insurance doesn't cover, it covers the structure.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't cover all of your internal.
Inside.
Yeah, so they did make it mandatory that you disclose it to the renters so that they know. We have, on our website, we actually have that report for free. So you can go on and get it anytime you need it.
Excellent. And I'll have that attached to the links of the podcast.
Perfect.
So to make it easy for people to contact you for any other questions and anything else associated. Okay. So what should buyers be looking for in the report specifically?
Really, when they get it, like I said, those indeterminations, anything that says in is what they should look at. With our report, like I said, you have that snapshot. Not everyone does it the same way, but our report has a snapshot and says these are the indeterminations. This is what you need to look at. So high fire would be one that you really need to look for right away. Special flood. Because those are the ones that you're going to have extra insurance.
Okay, so flood, fire, you need to make sure you take a look at that for the fund insurance when they cancel you in the future.
Yeah, or even looking at what those premiums are going to be going into buying that house.
And in a way to negotiating the deal too.
Yeah.
So you can actually negotiate it according to what your insurance is going to cost to make sure it balances out for the payments.
Right.
Make sure that that's okay. So what should buyers do if the report shows them in a hazard zone?
The first thing I would do is, I tell all buyers that they should get their insurance quotes early. Even if they're buying cash, they should get an insurance quote, because at some point they're probably going to want to get it even after the close of escrow. So that's the number one thing, is look at it, because in the high flood areas, it could be significantly large, that number, so you want to make sure that that's not going to throw off their premiums too much. And then look into what that entails. The high fire areas, I've had some people who recently, where there was a burn, they can't get insurance right now. So is that something that's going to affect your buying decision?
Sure. Now, what do you do in that case when the insurance cancels? What has to be done next to protect yourself as far as your property?
The biggest thing I would say is there is a way, like you can go in and you can get the government insurance.
Okay.
I know it's pretty pricey, and they have different kind of policies that they can do, which would include the rest of the insurance or the insurable stuff. I have a couple really good agents, insurance agents, that I usually refer that out to, who specialize in doing the government insurance and wraparound policies to make sure that they're covered.
Right. Okay, so it's not a total failure out there. There's still somebody that can be protected on, when these fires that breaks out and you need some type of coverage because you want to,
You just want to make sure that you're using somebody who's reputable and that actually knows what they're talking about and deals with that. Because I have had a couple of my customers call me and say that there was an insurance agent that said, we'll insure this, no problem. And then it turns out 60 days after close, they get a letter saying, no, sorry, we can't cover it. And so their 60 days of home ownership, they've had no insurance.
Oh, that's fun. That's totally fun.
So nobody wants that angry call in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner.
No. And yeah, especially right now with everything going on in Southern California and actually everywhere, destroying a lot of homes, and also, it's got to be increasing insurance on everybody else as well to make sure that these companies stay in business to protect us.
Well, even the power outage is amazing that, you have people in Northern California without any power because of all of these fires. It just affects so much more than you even realize.
Well, yeah, and the other thing that nobody's really thinking about is that our technology is in Silicon Valley, and guess where all those power outages are? So it's close to that area, so it's just like, wow, that you could never have it in a more worse location at this time, because we are relying on the technology and everywhere right now that you need to use that. Okay, so so let's say you're in a community, in a home ownership association, and you're close to a fire zone. What would you recommend as far as for the community?
There is a program called Firewise that some communities get involved in. I don't think there's too many in Southern California. I think there's one in San Diego, but it's a really good program that they have for communities where they can get together, and it actually helps lower their premiums.
Great.
And really what it's just doing is the community doing annual events to make sure that brush is cleared and all the underneath foliage is all cleared out to make those homes as protected as possible if a fire were to happen and go through that community. So it's a really cool program. It's a public program you can go on. I think it's firewise.com. If they need the information, they can always contact me. I'd be happy to share it with them. That's good
because everyone wants to reduce that right now, and now it's just right in front of everybody's faces right now, being all over every TV. Everyone's family members calling them about their house and.
Mark's safe.
Mark's safe on Facebook.
Like, you live like
green circle check. Yeah, we want to make sure that that's there. Okay, so the environmental section of a report that covers what exactly again?
So those are your man-made hazards. That's going to be your oil wells, your underground.
Okay, so we got that covered. And then any other type of companies that do this type of report that you have?
Well, there's several competing companies. Obviously, there are a couple of companies in the industry that do them.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what does your company do? Snap NHD do differently than everybody else?
So the one thing that we do that's really nice is we maintain our own data. Meaning, so all the NHD reports, what they do is they compile public data. If it's not public data, we really can't give you any information because really we're taking government, state, local data and putting it all together in an easy to read format for buyers and sellers and agents. And so what we do is we maintain our own data, meaning that if there's questions, we're not using somebody else to get it. We can deep dive, we can look at it. What's the solution? What's the problem? I had somebody with taxes call me a week ago and the tax base came up as 0 and they were like, what is going on? Well, it turned out it was a nonprofit, which was interesting. I didn't realize that nonprofits don't have an assessed tax value.
Right.
So then we had to go in and manually figure out what the tax base was and give them all the information. But we have a great support team that can do that for them. So it makes it nicer. The other thing that we do is we get them out really fast. We're a technology company based. So they come out in a minute. We can deliver them on the weekend. So if you're writing offers and you need to know if it's a high flood fire zone because it's going to affect their buying decision, we can push that report out really quickly on the weekend for you if you need. So those are some benefits. The other thing that we have is the free flood report for the tenants,
Yes.
and then we also have a really nice tax calculator they can use.
Okay.
So if they're out there, if you're out showing properties, it's really easy. I glaze over when somebody says tax calculator. I'm like, great, I don't know all the numbers. That's the whole point of the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know this, but with ours, it's all it is the property address, the sales price, and the closing date.
Okay.
And then it auto-populates everything for you.
Okay. Another question that I have is about earthquakes. We're in California.
Yeah.
So you guys have the detailed map on, like, you know, faults, everything else associated in reports?
Yeah, we have. So what we have is the determinations, and then we do a map that kind of gives them an idea of where they are. A common misconception is people think if they're in a fault zone, they're on a fault line,
Mm-hmm.
which is not the case at all. They can't build structures. I think it's within 50 feet of an actual fault line.
Okay.
So a fault zone just means that you're in the maximum zone of shaking, like this is going to have the most impact.
Mm-hmm.
So we do give that information, and in regards to earthquakes, there's a couple different determinations. One that's more prevalent down here in South County is the liquefaction.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that their house liquefaction is really just it's a high water table under the soil. So
Okay.
We're coastal. It makes sense.
Right.
And all that means is that if there was a really big earthquake, and probably 5, 6 and above,
Yeah.
it could cause the water table to rise, and the soil takes like a sand like consistency,
Sure.
and then the property could tilt or shift, and it could cause cracking in the foundation. So it's not like your house is going to fall into the middle of the earth
Right.
in Florida. We're not going to have a huge sinkhole
Yeah.
open, but it's something you need to be aware of in case there is like shifting and cracking in your foundation.
That's good.
So that's a big one in South County that I get a lot of questions about.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I thought of it, but I just forgot to write it down as well as a question on that. So would, you know, being near fault line, who, you know, besides liquefaction, would new homes be more of a concern being near fault line than older homes?
No, I think most of the newer homes are built to code.
Okay.
They're coming up with newer and better
Okay.
building processes to make sure that the homes are going to be okay and that they move and they're flexible. I don't know if you've ever been, I was in a hospital when there's an earthquake. I've been in a hospital twice when there's an earthquake. And it's the scariest thing in the world, because I'm like, I don't know if this is the safest place or the worst place to be in during an earthquake. I'm
Right.
really terrified. But the whole building just moves with it. Or a high rise or anything like that.
Right.
You can feel the movement in the building. And newer homes are going to be built more to that standard.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas older homes, before they had that, I mean, you're more likely to have shifting and cracking and that kind of thing, where they've got the old brick fireplaces or something like that.
Sure.
Those are the items that you're going to have concern with.
Okay, that's good. I think I got all your questions in as far as what I have. What else do you have, you know, to say about, you know, looking, you know, we've been together for a few minutes for a few questions. What else do you have to say as far as with natural hazards?
I would just say that, you know, do your due diligence. Make sure you're looking at it and kind of looking at it. There's a lot of, it's really one of those things that people just kind of like, it's not that important. I'll deal with it later.
Right.
But it's always after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
when you've already bought the house, that it becomes an issue. So do take the time to look at it. Make sure you're looking at it. Couple fun facts. An active fault zone is one that's been active for 100,000 years or more. I don't know how they determined that, like cave wall or
Geologists.
So when you get an active fault, it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it's gone off anytime in the last even 200 years.
Right.
It just means that at some point in the last
100,000.
100,000 years it went off. So
Wow.
yeah, that's a fun fact I like to leave people with. It's got a lot of
Drama.
quirks, yeah, like. So,
Okay, that's all I have to say. And the best way to get in touch with you as far as, you know, NHD reports.
either phone number or email.
Okay.
Do you want to copy that? You want me to?
You can state your you know, phone number, email if you want, and
Okay.
I'll attach it to the.
So mobile line is 714-609-9299, and then my email is just Sarah, SARAH, @snapnhd.com.
Okay. Great. Well, Sarah, thanks for joining, and appreciate you coming down and sharing with us disclosures that could save our buyers headaches and protect our sellers from any lawsuits. So thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks for coming in. Until next time, this is the Millennial Realtor Podcast, and we'll let you know the next one coming up.